Hey guys, it's Danny. Alrighty, today we're going to discuss about this little beauty right here. This is the Encyclia vitellina. It's one of the orchids you might have already heard about if you just started your journey into growing orchids. And this is because it is a very popular orchid. What makes it so popular? Can you actually care for it if you buy it? Well, we're going to try to figure it out in this video. Now, first of all, the Encyclia vitellina is a botanical species, meaning it is not a man-made hybrid. But of course, in cultivation, we are talking about man-raised or man-propagated orchids, since it's never a good idea to remove orchids from their natural habitat. Not to mention, in some regions, it is illegal and very punishable. But even so, man has tried to preserve the lineage. So no other type of orchid, whether it be a totally different genre or a different variety, has been hybridized with what we call the Encyclia vitellina today. The natural species is actually found in Mexico at high elevations up to 2,600 meters, and this makes it a cool grower. But Danny, your environment is really warm. How are you able to grow this orchid? Well, this is because it is a very forgiving orchid actually, and can tolerate conditions that are not necessarily ideal for it. But we'll get into the care tips a little later. Let's just look at the orchid and see why people, including myself, love it so much. Well, first of all, let's look at the flowers. As you can see, it's not a big flowered orchid. But the thing that strikes you the most is the color. It is a beautiful, intense orange color that just happens to be up my alley. I love warm, orangey, red colors. Inside the flower, we can see a tiny little lip, which is yet again very vivid yellow, transitioning into yet again the orange color. Now, these flowers are not incredibly showy. They're also not fragrant, quite at all. But this color is so striking that I think people just love it the moment they see it. I know it has been the case with me. Whenever you walk into my greenhouse from 10 meters away, you see this orchid despite the size of its flowers because it's just so vivid. A funny thing about the flowers that I noticed: if you look at the stem of the flowers, you'll notice it is orange as well. It's not green like other orchids. So I find this to be a pretty nice detail of the flowers. Now, the orchid herself is not a big orchid, making it very suitable for tiny spaces. And I know you cannot really tell, but right now mine is as big as my palm. It can get slightly larger than this, but don't imagine it will get to the size of the, let's say, Oncidium cherry baby. No, not even close to it. This is classified as a medium-sized orchid, but as you can see, I don't think you'll have issues placing this anywhere on your shelf. The pseudobulbs are really tiny, and the leaves are not very long, but the striking thing about them is this sort of formation on top of them, which I will try to not remove, but you can see there have been some patches removed here. It looks like there is a sort of dust on the pseudobulbs and on the leaves. This is its natural pigmentation. It's not dust from the air or a disease or some fungus on the orchid. And this white cast on the pseudobulbs and leaves gives it a sort of a grayish color. It's a green-gray with mattified leaves and pseudobulbs, so don't expect a vivid green color out of this orchid. Now, why would the orchid have this cast over it? Simple, to protect it from water. Let me show you what this formation actually does for the orchid. If you try to pour water on the pseudobulbs or the leaves of a vitellina, you will notice that the water absolutely runs off. It does not wet the pseudobulb in the slightest. Look at this. With time, this cast can disappear here and there. Also, the more you maneuver the orchid, the more you might get this cast on your fingers. It's not easily removable, but in places it can be. You can see the older pseudobulb here. It did get a little bit wet, but this new pseudobulb, absolutely not. And this is a great protection mechanism. You might already know that it's not a good idea in our homes to leave water standing on the leaves and in the crowns of orchids because it can lead to problems. And many orchids have found many ways to deal with it. Let's take, for example, the Phalaenopsis orchid, which naturally grows slanted to one side, and so the water doesn't pool in the crown but just runs off of her leaves. Well, the vitellina has found this more ingenious way, I would say, except for the the cuticle, which naturally protects any orchid leaves from pathogen entering their system, the vitellina has this additional grayish cast. Although I cannot really show you on mine, the vitellina has similar looking roots to the Cattleyas. It is actually related to Cattleyas and the Cattleya family. Therefore, there are many hybrids in between the Encyclia vitellina and the epidendrums, and not only. Growth pattern is yet again very similar to a Cattleya. It produces new pseudobulbs regularly, I would say maybe twice a year. You can see I have new pseudobulbs here, but another new growth just growing in the back. Each pseudobulb can produce multiple shoots, but it can only produce one flower spike, since the flower spike emerges from the very top of the cane. We call it a terminal spike. So just like with the Cattleya, the Encyclia vitellina only blooms once per pseudobulb on a terminal spike, but not only once per season. It can actually bloom multiple times per season every time a pseudobulb matures. The pseudobulb has a little sheath, but don't imagine anything very showy. This sheath right here barely shows. It does produce a little sheath, and inside that sheath you will see at some point the flower spike and the buds developing. Yet again, very similar to Cattleyas. If you've ever owned a Cattleya, you will not be taken by surprise by the Encyclia vitellina. Each pseudobulb takes about 6 to 9 months to completely mature, depending on the weather outside. I discovered that the pseudobulbs produced in winter, when the light quantities, maybe not that big, are sometimes smaller in size, which is fairly odd because this orchid supposedly doesn't really need all that much light. So now let's go a little bit into the care for this orchid. I think we've covered pretty much all there is to cover visual wise for this orchid. So because the Encyclia is coming from such high elevations, it is actually a cool to intermediate orchid. And yes, even though Mexico is a pretty warm region, the altitude has greater impact on orchids than their geographical location. So in its natural habitat, this orchid doesn't really encounter very high temperatures. And some of you might already say, well, okay, I cannot grow this orchid. Well, don't jump to conclusions. This, I've discovered, is a very hardy orchid. Even in my older climate, and in this one as well, the Encyclia vitellinas that I had coped with summertime and high temperatures extremely well. I wouldn't have said this is a cool grower. I did try to maintain it in a cooler position, yes, but there's just so much I can do, and of course she experienced the full-blown summer in my area, which is a subtropical area. And no, I don't live in the mountains. So I would say that this orchid is both suited for those of you who have or who can maintain pretty cool conditions all year round. But if you have warm summers, I would say don't worry about it, at least try it out, because I suspect this orchid is very tolerant to warm temperatures as well, and I don't think you'll have issues, unless of course you expose it to very high temperatures, extreme temperatures. So if you can, maybe keep it sheltered in your home. If you're comfortable in your home, she will be comfortable most probably as well. When it comes to light, this orchid yet again is supposedly an intermediate grower. She doesn't really like all that much light. And I did keep her until this year under artificial light, and she did spectacular. And as you can see, I do have a bloom spike. Mind you, it is the very first bloom spike of this orchid's life. She was a young orchid. But it's not necessarily super spectacular. So this year I'm trying to offer it a little bit more light than this, because there are growers who do grow this orchid in bright light. Not direct sunshine, especially not in hot temperatures, but bright light, maybe on Oncidium light. So for the past few months, maybe 3 months or so, I have moved her into a brighter location, and she seems to enjoy it a lot because the new growth she's growing is developing rather quickly. So I would say this orchid is suitable both for lower light conditions. I would not go as low as Phalaenopsis light. If you have artificial light, I think she will do great under artificial light. But if you can provide bright Oncidium light, I think she will do spectacular as well. When it comes to watering, well, here is what this orchid is most finicky about: water. She absolutely loves water and does not like to stay dry for extended periods of time. In any case, not like the Cattleya orchids, so I try to keep mine evenly moist most of the time. Yet again, think about Oncidium orchids. It is an epiphyte and should not be maintained constantly super soggy. Being maintained damp or slightly moist, I think, is the way to go with the Encyclia vitellina, even in winter time. So there isn't a schedule of watering for this orchid. I pretty much observe it, and I already know whenever she is almost completely dry, I give her a good watering and she is super happy. When your Encyclia vitellina will require water, you will see on the older pseudobulbs mainly the fine ridges, the fine lines. This means the pseudobulbs are getting dehydrated and this orchid could use some water, and I think mine could actually use some water at this point. Other than that, I do not give any special treatment to this orchid. I fertilize it together with my other orchids, and I am using MSU fertilizer for distilled or osmosis water, since I'm using osmosis water. And I adjust my fertilizing in the winter time in accordance to my climate, since my climate affects the greenhouse quite a lot. So in the winter time, not as much water, not as much fertilizer, simply because this orchid doesn't grow all that fast, such as in the summertime. So alrighty guys, this has been the video for the vitellina. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you already have this orchid, let me know your experiences in a comment down below so we can all learn from each other. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. Subscribe to my channel for regular orchid videos, and don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss a video. And with that said, I'll see you all next time. Bye!